health and environment effects of carbon nanotubes that find use in the construction sector. It has been created by a NanOER project. Specifically, the Research Lab of Advanced Composite Nanomaterials and Nanotechnology of NTUA has worked on this content. The contents of the presentation are the following. Initially, the definition of the material will be given together with its main structural and functional properties. Then, the main manufacturing processes will be described. The main uses in the construction sector will be discussed. Afterwards, the health effects will be analyzed and prevention measures will be suggested. Also, the main environmental effects will be presented. Concluding, an example of an LCA calculation for the production of CNTs will be given. Carbon nanotubes, or CNTs, are allotropic formations of carbon in a nanometer-sized cylindrical structure, which show excellent electronic and mechanical properties, make them suitable for a variety of technological and scientific applications. They are composed exclusively of carbon atoms which have an sp2 hybridization. CNTs can be imagined as a sheet of graphene rolled into a tube shape. There are two main types of CNTs, the single wall, where there is only one tube and no additional graphene layers, and the multi-walled, which have a central tube surrounded by one or more graphene layers. When CNTs are bundled together, they are named as tube bundles. Single-walled CNTs are wrapped graphene sheets with a diameter usually between 0.6 nanometers and 2 nanometers, but there are also some references to single-walled nanotubes with smaller and bigger diameters. Multi-walled CNTs are nanotubes consisting of coaxial cylinders with approximate diameter of 2 nanometers to 100 nanometers and a length smaller than 1 millimeter. The distance between the cylinders is 3.4 Armstrong, which is a distance 1 Armstrong bigger in comparison to the distance between graphite sheets. This difference occurs because of the cylindrical shape and the van der Waals forces which appear between the cylinders. Generally, multiple nanotubes consist of wrapped sheets forming cylinders which show lots of similarities to graphite ones. The cylindrical surface of carbon nanotubes is structured in pentagons and hexagons. Each of these polygons contain carbon atoms with a variety of sizes, diameter of 3 nanometers to 15 nanometers. The atoms are placed on the edges of the polygons. Generally, there are many forms of CNTs according to the way the graphite sheet is wrapped. The unit vectors A1 and A2 determine the direction in which the graphene sheet is folded to form the tube. This hand-shaped vector connects two crystallographic equivalent positions in the two-dimensional graphene sheet. The subscripts N and M represent the repeating crystal lattice, which determines the diameter and helicity along the axis of the tube. When M is equal to 0, then we have a zigzag structure. When M is equal to N, then we have the armchair structure, and when N is different from M, then we have the chiral nanotubes. The way of folding determines an important part of the properties, metallic or semiconducting CNTs. CNTs show a great electronic, thermal, optical, and mechanical properties. The electrical conductivity of CNTs is determined by their geometry and their crystallography. They also show superconductivity under different temperature conditions. In addition, depending on their structure and chirality, they can be semiconducting or metallic, making them useful in nanoscale electronics. The high hardness of CNTs occurs because of the powerful bonds between the graphite sheets. Their geometrical characteristics also play a role in the determination of their hardness. CNTs are known for their high tensile strength and stiffness, being one of the strongest materials known. The properties of CNTs are directly related to their structural characteristics. The electrical properties are dependent on the chirality, When 2 times n plus m is equal to 3 times an integer number, then the scientists show metallic behavior. In any other case, they are semiconductors. CNTs exhibit very high thermal conductivity, 1750 to 5800 watt per meter Kelvin. The specific heat of multiple CNTs is close to the graphites, but for single-wall carbon nanotubes is higher than the graphite. The chemical activity of nanotubes is higher than that of a graphitic lattice and increases with its curvature. Therefore, a small diameter nanotube has a higher chemical activity. The elastic modulus is independent of nanotube chirality, but dependent on its diameter. Smaller diameter means increased mechanical stability. CNTs are usually manufactured by 3 processes. These processes are electric arc discharge, laser ablation, and chemical vapor deposition. Each of these processes produces different types of nanotubes. Arc discharge is the oldest way of producing carbon nanotubes. The high temperature which goes along with the experiment evaporates carbon atoms. To be more specific, the electric arc vaporizes a graphite anode mixed with transition metals, ferrum, cobalt, or nickel, combined with a graphite powder. The parameters of the process, such as the gas flow, pressure, and the concentration of transition metals, should be flexible so that the yield of CNTs is the highest possible. Usually, the structures of the CNTs produced by this process are short tubes with high quality. The discharge is applied via 2 carbon electrodes which produce an arc by direct current. The electrodes interact with an inert gas which increases carbon deposition. When the pressure of the gas gets stabilized, the power supply is turned on and the positive electrode gets close to the negative electrode to strike the electric arc. After the stabilization of the arc, the rods are kept about a millimeter apart, while CNTs deposits on the negative electrode. Once the length of the CNTs reaches the desired dimension, the power supply is cut off and the experimental ordnance is left for cooling. Laser ablation as a method is a recent discovery for producing CNTs. It's also called pulsed laser vaporization. The technique functions like electric arc discharge. It vaporizes the carbon, which is being deposited on a substrate surface. Specifically, laser irradiation vaporizes a piece of graphite target, which must be pure under high temperature under inert conditions. The temperature level plays an important role in the quality and yield of these products. The ideal temperature is 1200 degrees Celsius. If a lower temperature is applied, the CNTs show lots of defects. The production of single-wall nanotubes is being performed by incorporation of small quantities of transition metals, nickel or cobalt, into the graphite pellet as catalysts. The yield of single-wall nanotubes depends mainly on the metal catalyst used. As it is shown in the figure, a laser beam is introduced into the furnace and focuses onto the target that lies in the center of the furnace. The target is vaporized to the high temperature and forms single-wall nanotubes which are collected from a trap. The process shows lots of advantages in comparison to arc discharge and laser ablation. These are the following. The CVD is simple and flexible. The reaction process is easy to control and the reactor design is uncomplicated. The structure of the final product can be easily controlled. The carbon sources used are available in high quantities as raw materials. There is also the capability of industrial scale production. The CVD offers variation of the produced materials, for example, the size and type. Chemical vapor deposition is actually a thermal reaction of dehydrogenation. It is defined as the deposition of a solid on a heated surface from a chemical reaction in the vapor phase. The reactor comprises a quartz tube extended through a furnace. A transition metal such as iron, nickel, or cobalt is used as a catalyst to lower the temperature required so the hydrocarbons in the gaseous phase are cracked into carbon and hydrogen. The catalyst is placed inside a ceramic mold at the center of the first furnace according to the supported catalyst approach. The whole process is taking place under oxygen-free conditions by flushing the system with an inert gas. Simultaneously, the furnace is being heated to a desired temperature until a steady state condition is achieved. After the stabilization of the state, the gas flow for acetylene along with hydrogen is released for a desired time of reaction. After the end of the process, the CNTs produced are collected and weighed. According to the floating catalyst approach, the catalyst, first and in this case, is simultaneously introduced in the system together with vapors of the carbon source, for example CAM4, and the deposition of the CNTs takes place on silicon wafer substrates. The process consists of the following steps. The reactive gases are introduced into the reactor under forced flow conditions. The absorption of the reactant gases is done on the surface of the substrate. The chemical reaction takes place at the contact surface. And finally, the absorption of the byproducts takes place. There are two different types of CNTs growth according to the position of the catalyst. According to the tip growth, the catalytic particle is removed from the substrate as the nanotube is formed between it and the substrate. According to the base growth, the catalytic particle remains on the substrate and the nanotube grows with carbon being added continuously from its base. Characteristics, for example, diameter and entanglement, the quality and the quantity of the produced CNTs are highly dependent on the reaction temperature, reaction time, and flow rate of the reaction gases. Also, the chemistry and size of the catalyst plays a crucial role on the formation of the carbon nanotubes. The main uses of CNTs in the construction sector are as materials reinforcement in advanced composite materials, in structural health monitoring sensors, and in functional coatings and paints. CNTs can be used also in cables and conductors, as well as for energy harvesting. Last but not least, CNTs have found use in smart pavements. CNTs are widely used to reinforce concrete. Examinations have shown that the improved strength and durability of the material. The high tensile strength of CNTs is one of the most important factors when it comes to the improvement and enhancement of the performance of the cement. It is obvious that the strength of the material is increased when CNTs are included in it. Also, the flowability of the concrete is reduced considering that CNTs have a high aspect ratio, leading to the formation of clusters which prevent the movement of the concrete particles. Another factor that improves the strength of concrete is the ability of the CNTs to form strong bonds with the paste and enable bridging. The thermal conductivity of concrete is also enhanced by CNTs at extreme temperatures. CNTs are by nature excellent heat conductors, so they can dissipate heat from the concrete surface more quickly and protect it from thermal damage. Concrete durability can also be improved by the presence of CNTs in the cement matrix. CNTs prevent the corrosion of the cement and make it resistant to chemical attacks, such as the penetration of chloride ions, due to their excellent chemical stability. These facts lead to the increase of the service life of this structural material. Another meaningful application of CNTs in the construction sector is the manufacturing of structural health monitoring sensors. These kind of sensors can evaluate concrete strength and determine factors that affect its development during its early curing. It is obvious that concrete structures need to be examined throughout their service life as well as throughout their manufacturing period. Construction materials such as cement and related substitutes present electrical and thermal insulation properties. These modify these features according to the research studies that have been made in the field. These studies have shown that CNTs show piezoresistivity under certain conditions, an effect that enables them to detect changes in the mechanical properties of a cement specimen. The excellent conductivity and aspect ratio of CNTs make them suitable to produce conductive coatings in the form of a network. CNTs can also be used in protective coatings and paints for anti-corrosion protection, water repellency, and protection against UV radiation. CNTs are also used for the manufacturing of composite materials. They can be dispersed in polymer, metal, or metal oxide matrices and improve the electrical properties of the material. When they are dispersed in a polymer, they improve the mechanical properties, such as the viscoelasticity and the fracture strength of the composite. Nanotubes reinforced composites have been created successfully until now, and they will certainly get under investigation for large-scale production in the next decades. Nanometer-sized electronic devices are another field where CNTs are applicable. Carbon nanotubes have the potential to be used in the manufacturing of high-capacity, lower-weight electrical cables and conductors, which would be useful for electrical installations in buildings and other structures. The expanding needs of traffic data collectors leads to the exploration of new technologies and sensors for smart and functional uses. Self-sensitive CNT concrete is considered as an effective sensor for traffic detection. The sensing ability of the CNT dispersed into the cement matrix detects the strain and stress which occurs by the pavement itself. Changes or deformations of the material cause changes in its electrical resistance, and therefore measurements of the electrical resistance can give information for the dynamic behavior of the pavement. The thermal properties of carbon nanotubes can also be harnessed to improve thermal insulation in buildings, thereby reducing heating and cooling costs. Several health effects have been identified for carbon nanotubes, including respiratory problems, skin effects, impacts on the immune system, inflammatory response, as well as carcinogenic potential. Several studies have proven the cell toxicity that can be caused by CNTs. The special prevention measures need to be taken into account. Inhalation of carbon nanotubes can cause respiratory problems. Because of their size and shape, they can reach the deepest parts of the lungs and potentially cause inflammation, pulmonary fibrosis. Animal studies have shown that exposure to carbon nanotubes can induce an inflammatory response. This could lead to chronic disease if exposure is prolonged or repeated. Direct contact with carbon nanotubes may cause skin irritation in some people. Some in vitro studies have suggested that carbon nanotubes may have toxic effects on human cells, including DNA damage and cell death. The shape, length, and surface functionalization of nanotubes may influence their toxicity. Although not yet definitely demonstrated in humans, there are concerns that carbon nanotubes may have carcinogenic properties. Last but not least, it has been suggested that carbon nanotubes could affect the immune system, although the exact mechanisms and consequences of such effects are not yet fully understood. The use of CNTs in the construction sector could cause serious lung diseases in the workers and staff who get exposed to them. Studies that have been made on animals have shown that CNTs have the potential to harm the respiratory system of living beings by giving rise to severe inflammatory and fibrotic reactions if they reach the lung. According to recent advances, these reactions could lead to the genesis of a tumor with an increasing rate. The overall estimation of pulmonary toxicity is relevant to the dose of CNTs inside the lungs. In the SEM images, it is clear as seen how different types of CNTs affect the cell morphology and cause fatality. Prevention methods, both engineering controls and safety work protocols need to be considered. The engineering controls that should be taken into account are ventilation systems, closed processes that limit the direct exposure and the use of personal protective equipment, Training of employees on hazards and proper material handling practices is prerequisite. Constant environmental monitoring for the presence of nanotubes in the air should be running. Regular medical examinations for workers are also important, and the responsible waste management policies should be followed. This introduction of CNTs will necessarily result in environmental hazards from the moment they get released into the environment. CNTs are detected in nature in their natural form, generated in indoor-outdoor soot, and can be found also as industrial waste. These are two ways of depositing CNTs in the environment, directly during use and consumption of relevant goods and indirectly as a waste. The gathering of data is of great importance for the understanding of their undesirable consequences. CNTs as nanomaterials constitute a threat for the environment, but there are a lot of gaps on the environmental hazard identification. There is the construction sector mainly affects the soil, the wastewater treatment, and terrestrial organisms. The most severe impact of CNTs on the environment is the one that affects the aquatic species. Aquatic species aren't only being polluted themselves, but their pollution gets transferred to humans through the food chain. Planktonic microorganisms are species which get seriously damaged by the presence of CNTs in the aquatic environment. They play a key role in the recycling of nutrients on the surface of the water, thus affecting productivity by reducing photosynthesis and the development of biomass, which is necessary for the feeding of aquatic animals. Kinds of algae and unicellular protozoa are getting polluted by the agglomeration of CNTs with the algae. Growth of the algae. As for the protozoans, scientific conclusions state that they are sensitive to the exposure to CNTs, although there are still lots of unanswered questions which demand more research to be done, mainly comparative and multifactored. It is certain, though, that some of them cannot recover from toxicity after a long-term exposure. Pelagic vertebrates, such as fish, are polluted by CNTs and generally by nanomaterials in some of their organs. These organs include gills, gut, liver, and brain. The mucous layer of the gills may trap CNTs, but it's quite improbable for them to enter the blood. Fish gut epithelium may take up CNTs by endoketosis. Other diodes for CNTs into the fish organism are buccal olfactory opening, eyes, and urinary openings. The nervous system gets exposed to CNTs when the nerves of the above organs get infected, especially the cavity ones. The exposed organisms to CNTs are subject to bioaccumulation in their body. The uptake, the translocation, the retention, and the extraction of CNTs are very important factors when it comes to quantification of this effect. Most studies focus on uptake and extraction of CNTs throughout the organism. The experiments have been done mainly on various animal and plant models. It is proven that CNTs are ingested by invertebrate and vertebrate organisms and are subsequently extracted. Thus, bioaccumulation of CNTs in the organism is to be considered unaffectable for them. Although on any occasion it was shown that CNTs penetrated plant tissues, so organisms containing CNTs may become source of entry of CNTs into the food chain, causing ingestion by larger animals and leading to long-term biomagnification. The species which have been examined are freshwater protozoans, freshwater flea, sediment-living myobenthic crustaceans, aquatic vertebrates, several terrestrial organisms, and plants. The effect of CNTs on soil may cause undesirable severe effects on terrestrial species, invertebrates, vertebrates, and plants. Also, there is a high possibility of genotoxicity caused by CNTs on terrestrial mammals. Terrestrial plants also get affected by the CNTs dissemination in soil as it's clear. Still, there are some plant species such as spinach, rice, cucumber, and lettuce which gets infected. by scientists at a concentration of 1000 milligrams per liter. Finally, some studies state that some plants' growth gets boosted by the presence of scientists in low doses. The exposure to high doses results in phytotoxicity. All the above consequences to the terrestrial species are related to soil, which is polluted by scientists by several terrestrial activities, including construction ones. Scientists have the ability to absorb organic and inorganic contaminants, which could alter the mobility and bioavailability of these substances in the environment, potentially leading to unanticipated toxic effects. Wastewater, which is leaked by several industries to the natural environment, needs to be treated and prevented from polluting the water, which is demanded for each of the use. All kinds of CNTs appear in wastewater, so a variety of treatment methods is needed to manage the polluted water. Conventional wastewater treatment methods may not be effective in removing CNTs, which means that they could be released into the environment if not properly managed. Membranes manufactured from CNTs, for example vertically aligned and horizontally aligned, and polymers can reject salt and transport water throughout the treatment infrastructure. An example will be now presented for an LCA calculation for the lab production of CNTs through two different methodologies, the supported and the floating catalyst approach, both implemented in CVD reactors. In the first case, camphor is used and carbon source, and ferrocene as catalyst. The resulting material is a carpet or forest of vertically aligned CNTs. In the other case, acetylene is the carbon precursor and zeolite with iron particles is used as catalyst. The resulting material in this case is CNTs in an entangled form. A cradle-to-gate analysis has been carried out. LCI for the floating catalyst approach. Most of the data were available from lab experiments. For ferrocene, which was not included in the database of CIMAPRO software, the modeling of its production processes was carried out. Emissions have been estimated theoretically according to literature evidence. Similarly, for the supported catalyst approach, all data except of the catalyst were available. The catalyst in the case is synthesized in the lab, thus also it is modeled separately and used in the CNT model. Here you may watch the whole procedure in CIMAPRO software for preparing the supported catalyst approach model step by step. Graph depicts the share of its contributor to the impact characterization results for the floating catalyst approach. The greatest contributor to CVD's environmental footprint is the electrical consumption in most of the categories. Generally, CVD is an energy-intensive process with heating requirements ranging from 480 to 9,100 megajoule per kilogram CNTs. In this case, the corresponding values are around 2,480 megajoule per kilogram of CNTs. Other high factors increasing the environmental load is the use of camphor and silicon substrates. Despite camphor being a natural product, it has a significant contribution to several impact categories such as marine eutrophication, agricultural land occupation, natural land transformation, marine and terrestrial ecotoxicity. For natural resources, camphor extraction process and disposal of biomass waste result in an extra environmental load. The impact of catalyst is also non-negligible, mostly affecting the metal depletion category. In terms of the impact of exhaust emissions, these were found to influence the following categories: human toxicity, fresh water, marine and terrestrial ecotoxicity. This graph depicts the share of its contributor to the impact characterization results for the supported catalyst approach. The greatest contributor to CVD's environmental footprint is the electrical consumption in most of the categories, also for this case with values of 1,100 megajoule per kilogram CNTs. The acetylene presents a significant share across most of the impact categories. Its production process, as it is included in the EcoInvent database, involves partial oxidation of natural gas and cleaning of flue gas with electrofilters, which reflect on severe impact categories such as freshwater eutrophication, agricultural and urban land occupation, natural land transformation, and water depletion. The impact of catalyst is also non-negligible. Photochemical NOx transformation is also present due to the acetylene flow in the exhaust emissions. Lastly, this comparative graph illustrates the effects of the two alternatives, giving the characterization values of each impact category. As it is observed, Route 1, the floating catalyst approach, has the highest impact across all categories. This fact is attributed to the higher energy demands needed not only for the higher growth temperatures, which is 850 degrees, but also for the supply of additional heating to facilitate the evaporation of the raw materials. Secondly, the higher productivity of Route 2, the supported catalyst approach, results in a drop of the environmental load, which implies that more Route 1 batches are necessary to achieve same production volume. So the heating stage is the most impactful part of CNT life cycle and thus a focal point when considering the process upscaling. Apart from energy, the use of silicon substrate, which is essential for the orientation of the final material, is another contributor to the Route 1 environmental print. Here you may find the main review articles with information presented. Funded by NanOER project of Erasmus+.